Elena Morgan had spent 15 years at Halberd Dynamics, a multinational corporation that thrived on mergers, acquisitions, and complicated contracts. Her office was tucked away at the end of the 12th floor, a narrow space with tall windows that overlooked the city skyline. Most days she worked long after the sun had set, her desk lamp casting a soft glow over towers of files, annotated contracts, and her leather-bound ledger. To outsiders, she seemed unremarkable, just another compliance officer lost in the bureaucracy of a giant firm. But inside the company, those who had been around long enough knew that Elena was the quiet spine that held Halberd upright. Her power did not come from loud speeches or commanding boardrooms. It came from her pen. Every contract that passed through Halberd Dynamics bore her careful review. Every acquisition, every partnership, every loan agreement. She had scrutinized the fine print, tightened the loose ends, and tucked away safeguards. It was a silent kind of control, invisible until it mattered, and for 15 years, it had kept the company safe. But in corporate life, survival often made enemies. The board was restless. Growth had slowed after the last 2 fiscal years, and investors demanded speed and vision. So when Travis Cole was appointed as the new CEO, Halberd's destiny shifted. Travis was only in his early 40s, tall, well-dressed, with a salesman's smile and the confidence of someone who had never been told no. He arrived with promises of disruption, cutting through the so-called dead weight of legacy staff and bureaucracy. From the moment Travis took the stage at his first company-wide meeting, Elena knew what kind of leader he would be. He spoke in polished phrases about acceleration, transformation, and shareholder value. He dismissed questions that hinted at caution. To him, contracts were speed bumps, not safety rails. And to people like Elena, he barely spared a glance. In private meetings, he called her old-fashioned. "We don't need anchors when we're trying to sail," he had quipped once, laughing with his circle of young consultants. Elena hadn't replied. She simply slid another contract across the table, its language laced with the kind of protections that only years of foresight could craft. If Travis bothered to read them, he gave no sign. The truth was, Elena didn't fight him because she didn't have to. She had learned long ago that arrogance blinds men like Travis. They see silence as weakness and caution as irrelevance. What they never see, until it's too late, is the trap hidden in their own agreements. Elena's weapon was patience, and she wielded it with surgical precision. As months passed, Travis filled the offices with his chosen people. They were sharp, ambitious, and eager to impress him. Their language was full of buzzwords: scale, optimization, synergy. The older staff who had survived multiple regimes watched with wary eyes, whispering that Halberd was becoming a theater for one man's ego. Elena, as always, kept her head down, her pen moving, her ledger growing heavier with each passing week. The project that defined Travis's ambition came in the form of a grand partnership with Nordell Systems, a powerful conglomerate eager to expand into Halberd's market. To Travis, Nordell was the crown jewel, the deal that would cement his reputation and silence the board's doubts. For weeks he strutted through the halls, rehearsing presentations, polishing numbers, and boasting about the future. Elena was summoned to several preliminary meetings, though her presence was treated as perfunctory. She was given drafts of contracts to review, always at the last minute, always with the unspoken suggestion that she hurry. Travis's inner circle rolled their eyes when she insisted on corrections, but they signed off anyway, assuming she was indulging her obsession with legal trivia. What they never noticed was how carefully she layered the protections, weaving clauses into the dense fabric of the agreement, so unobtrusive that only a reader with her patience would find them. By the time the final deal was ready, autumn had settled over the city. The boardroom was prepared for a ceremony more than a negotiation. Glass walls polished to gleam, a long mahogany table lined with folders, and silver pitchers of water waiting beside neat stacks of glasses. Outside, the skyline shimmered under a golden sunset, skyscrapers glowing like embers in the fading light. Travis stood at the head of the table, every inch the triumphant leader. His tailored suit caught the light, his cufflinks glinting as he gestured with expansive confidence. The board members sat in neat rows along one side, the Nordell representatives opposite them, composed and watchful. Cameras had been forbidden. This was not yet a public spectacle, but the air carried the hum of anticipation, as if history were about to be written. Elena sat 3 seats down, near the middle of the table. She had arrived quietly, carrying only her fountain pen and her ledger. No one greeted her. No one asked her thoughts. She might as well have been invisible. But she didn't mind. Invisibility was her shield, and she wore it with the ease of long habit. Travis spoke with the rhythm of a showman. He painted Nordell as the perfect partner, the deal as a bridge to untold profits. He promised the board rapid expansion, seamless integration, and exponential growth. Heads nodded. A few directors even smiled, already imagining the praise from shareholders. When the time came, the contracts were distributed. Pages rustled as they slid across the table. Elena watched without expression as Nordell's lead counsel, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s, flipped through the document. His fingers moved with practiced speed, but then slowed. He frowned, leaning closer to the text. He read a paragraph once, then again, his lips tightening as he tapped the page with his pen. "This section," he said finally, his voice cutting through the room, "requires authorization from your continuity lead. Without that signature, none of this is binding." The silence that followed was absolute. Chairs creaked as board members shifted uncomfortably. Travis blinked, his rehearsed smile freezing in place. "Continuity lead," he repeated, as if the words were a foreign language. He turned toward his legal advisor, who shrugged helplessly. His gaze swept the table, searching for someone, anyone, to contradict what had just been said. It was only then that his eyes fell on Elena. For the first time that afternoon, she lifted her gaze from her closed ledger. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but her eyes held the weight of 15 years of patience. Around them, the room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the sunset burned deeper, the city cast in shadows edged with fire. Elena did not speak. She didn't need to. Her very presence was the answer. She was the continuity lead. She had been for years, named in quiet amendments that no one had bothered to question, signed off by directors who trusted her more than any rising executive. Every safeguard in the Nordell contract led back to her pen. Travis's jaw tightened. For the first time, his smooth facade cracked. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The power he had flaunted so recklessly now hung in the balance, resting on the silent woman he had dismissed as obsolete. Elena folded her hands neatly over her ledger. The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips, a smile that said she had been waiting for this moment all along. She let the silence stretch heavier with each second, until even the most oblivious director understood. The deal, the company's future, Travis's triumph, all of it depended on her, and she wasn't moving her pen. The silence that followed the Nordell Council's words stretched longer than anyone expected. Travis Cole's practiced charisma faltered, his confident posture sinking into hesitation. For weeks he had rehearsed this meeting in front of mirrors, certain that his charm and bold promises would sweep the room. Yet now, with a single clause, everything had slipped out of his hands. Elena Morgan sat steady, her fingers resting lightly on the cover of her ledger. She felt the weight of eyes turning toward her, board members, Nordell executives, even the younger consultants who had always dismissed her as furniture in the room. Their expressions carried the same message. The deal would not move forward without her. Travis cleared his throat, trying to recover his rhythm. "Well, of course, continuity authorization is just a formality," he said, forcing a grin. "Elena will sign off as required." All heads turned toward her. Elena didn't move. She adjusted her glasses slowly, deliberately, as though she had all the time in the world. Then she leaned back in her chair. "I'll need to review the final integration plan," she said quietly, her voice calm but edged with steel. The Nordell Council nodded approvingly, almost relieved. "Naturally. Our firm requires compliance oversight to be airtight. Without that assurance, our board would never ratify the agreement." The board members of Halberd Dynamics shifted uncomfortably. They were used to rubber-stamping flashy presentations, but now they realized the trap. This deal couldn't be pushed through on Travis's charm alone. Elena had positioned herself, quietly, invisibly, as the gatekeeper. Travis's jaw tightened. "We've been over the plan," he said, his voice sharper. "You've seen the drafts, Elena." "I've seen outlines," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Not an implementation schedule, not risk assessments, not a continuity matrix. Without those, I cannot authorize. And without authorization, the contract is invalid." The words landed like hammer blows. Nordell's lead negotiator folded his hands and leaned back, watching the power shift in real time. The directors murmured among themselves, exchanging uneasy glances. For the first time in his career, Travis felt cornered. His usual weapons, confidence, speed, bravado, were useless. Elena hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even accused him. She had simply invoked the language of the contract he had been too arrogant to read carefully. The meeting adjourned without signatures. Nordell's delegation departed with professional courtesy, but left behind a clear message. Without Elena's approval, they would not proceed. The board filed out quietly, some throwing Travis sympathetic glances, others already calculating how this failure would look in the quarterly report. Elena lingered. She didn't rush to leave, didn't avoid Travis's glare. She simply gathered her pen and ledger, slid them into her bag, and walked out with the unhurried steps of someone who knew the ground belonged to her. In the days that followed, tension spread through Halberd like cracks in glass. Rumors circulated across departments that the Nordell deal had stalled, that Travis had lost face in front of the board, that the quiet compliance officer no one paid attention to had saved the company from walking into a disaster. Travis tried damage control. He summoned Elena to his office, a glass-walled corner suite filled with modern art and expensive furniture. She entered without expression, her posture calm, her hands clasped lightly before her. "You embarrassed me," Travis snapped, dispensing with pleasantries. "That was unnecessary." Elena tilted her head slightly. "I enforced the contract you signed." He leaned forward across his desk. "Do you realize what's at stake? This deal secures our future. The board expects it. Shareholders demand it. And you—" His voice hardened. "You're standing in the way." She met his anger with composure. "I'm standing for the company's survival. Nordell's integration plan leaves critical gaps in operations. If I sign off, we inherit risks that could cripple Halberd within 6 months. You may gamble with your reputation, Mr. Cole. I won't gamble with 15 years of stability." For a moment, Travis said nothing. He had faced hostile investors, tough regulators, arrogant rivals, but no one had ever spoken to him with such calm defiance. It unsettled him more than shouting ever could. "You'll sign," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. Elena adjusted her glasses. "Only when the conditions are met. Until then, the contract is locked." She turned and left, leaving him alone with his fury. Word of the confrontation leaked, as it always did. In the cafeteria, in the elevators, in hushed conversations at desks, employees whispered about Elena Morgan. Some described her as a savior, others as an obstacle, but all agreed on one thing: she was no longer invisible. Meanwhile, Nordell's patience wore thin. Their executives sent formal letters demanding compliance sign-off, threatening to reconsider the partnership. The Halberd board convened emergency sessions, pressing Travis for answers. He responded with half-truths, blaming legal delays, but the directors were not fools. They had seen the look in Nordell's counsel's eyes. They knew Elena's authority was ironclad. In the midst of this storm, Elena worked quietly as she always had. She reviewed integration drafts, highlighting risks, flagging inconsistencies, drafting alternative clauses. She never gloated, never bragged, but her colleagues noticed the subtle shift. She walked the halls with a new presence. People stepped aside to greet her. Junior staff approached her for advice. Authority clung to her like a shadow. Travis grew increasingly desperate. He called late-night strategy meetings, surrounding himself with consultants who promised quick fixes. He tried to sideline Elena, excluding her from invitations, but each time Nordell's team refused to meet without her. The contract required her oversight, and nothing could move without her signature. The board began to question him directly. "Why wasn't this clause highlighted?" one director asked sharply during a tense session. Travis forced a laugh. "A minor oversight. Elena is being overly cautious, but another director shook his head. Caution is why we've survived acquisitions before. If Nordel's plan fails, it's our reputation on the line, not just yours. Travis felt the room tilt away from him, inch by inch. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Elena remained in her office. The city outside glowed with thousands of windows, a map of light stretching into the horizon. She opened her ledger, running her fingers across the familiar pages. Each entry was a safeguard, a memory, a quiet battle fought and won through ink and patience. She thought of Travis, his arrogance, his recklessness, and felt no anger. Only inevitability. He was a man racing toward his own undoing, too blinded by ambition to see the trap he had built for himself. She didn't need to destroy him. She only needed to hold her ground, and gravity would do the rest. The knock on her door startled her. It was Margaret Liu, a senior board member with decades of experience and a reputation for cutting through pretense. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Elena," Margaret said softly, "I've read the integration documents. You're right. Nordel's plan is risky." Elena inclined her head but said nothing. "The board is divided. Some want to push forward anyway, but I think we both know who holds the pen." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Be careful, Elena. Power attracts enemies. Travis will not forgive this easily." When Margaret left, Elena sat alone with her thoughts. For years she had been invisible by design, her influence hidden in the margins of contracts. Now, the spotlight edged closer. She wondered if she was ready for the battles ahead. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, her pen rested on the open page of her ledger, ink glistening under the lamp. She tapped it once, a silent rhythm of resolve. The books demanded balance, and she would see it delivered. The weeks that followed turned Halberd Dynamics into a battlefield without smoke. Meetings that once ended in polished applause now dissolved into whispered doubts, clipped arguments, and lingering silences. Employees walked on eggshells, unsure of where loyalties should lie, toward the flashy CFO who promised a golden future, or the quiet compliance officer who held the power to stop him. Travis Cole tried to reclaim his ground with the only weapon he trusted: spectacle. He called for a grand presentation in the executive atrium, with banners displaying bold projections and a polished video showcasing Nordel's promises of growth. He paced the stage with his trademark grin, voice booming as he described a transformation that will propel Halberd into the next decade. But as the applause faded, the questions began. "What about operational continuity?" asked a mid-level director from logistics. "And compliance exposure?" another chimed in. "Have we secured the matrix approval?" Each time, Travis tried to wave the concerns away with practiced charm. But every question ended the same way. Eyes drifting toward Elena Morgan. She sat quietly near the back, her notebook balanced on her lap, glasses glinting in the light. She didn't volunteer a word, didn't interrupt, but her silence spoke louder than his speeches. The crowd knew that without her signature, nothing he promised could happen. Afterward, Travis stormed back to his office, slamming the door behind him. His team of consultants trailed like nervous shadows, offering excuses and half-baked strategies. None of them could change the truth. He was being undone not by opposition, but by omission. Elena's refusal to bend had become a wall he couldn't scale. That night, he poured whiskey into a crystal glass and stared out at the skyline. His reflection glared back, distorted in the pain. He replayed every board meeting, every sidelong glance, every whispered conversation. Power was slipping away from him, not with a bang, but with a quiet shift he couldn't stop. He decided then, if Elena wouldn't yield, he would break her. The first move was subtle. A sudden audit order landed on her desk, an internal probe into delayed sign-offs and procedural bottlenecks. Elena read the notice without reaction. She had anticipated this. Audits were Travis's way of applying pressure, hoping to trip her into a mistake. She opened her ledger and smiled faintly. 15 years of immaculate record spoke louder than accusations. Every clause, every footnote, every signature was in perfect order. The auditors came with clipboards and left with silence, unable to find a single crack. Next came isolation. Invitations to high-level meetings stopped arriving in her inbox. Memos bypassed her desk. Her name was quietly erased from planning documents. Travis thought cutting her out would diminish her authority. But Nordell's executives noticed instantly. When they realized Elena wasn't present, they refused to discuss key details. Continuity oversight, they reminded Travis curtly, is non-negotiable. His exclusion campaign backfired. Instead of weakening her, it underscored her indispensability. Still, Travis pressed harder. He began planting rumors, whispers that Elena was power-hungry, that she sought to sabotage the deal for personal gain. A few gullible employees repeated the gossip, but most dismissed it. Those who had seen her work over the years knew the truth. Elena never sought the spotlight. Her authority came from consistency, not ambition. One evening, Elena stayed late, the office quiet around her. The glow of her desk lamp framed her in a pool of light as she flipped through yet another draft of Nordell's integration plan. The gaps were still there, hidden in optimistic language and vague timelines, risk disguised as opportunity. She annotated every line, each note a blade sharpened for the battles to come. The door creaked open. Margaret Liu entered again, her expression calm but serious. She closed the door softly and sat across from Elena. "Travis is bleeding support," Margaret said without preamble. "The board is restless. Half of them are convinced Nordell is our salvation. The other half see the risks. You've positioned yourself at the center of both camps." Elena placed her pen down, folding her hands. "I've positioned the company where it belongs, on solid ground." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "You're winning, Elena, but winning draws fire. Be careful he doesn't corner you." Elena nodded, but inside she felt the weight of Margaret's words. For 15 years she had chosen invisibility as armor. Now visibility had found her whether she wanted it or not. The next day, Travis made his boldest move yet. He convened an emergency board session, summoning directors and Nordell's delegation. His tone was brisk, his smile sharpened into defiance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "Halberd Dynamics cannot afford paralysis. Our compliance officer has stalled this process long enough. Today, we vote to proceed with or without her signature." Gasps rippled through the room. Nordell's counsel raised a brow. "You understand," he said carefully, "that without continuity authorization, our board will reject this deal outright?" Travis spread his hands. "Then we'll renegotiate terms. Halberd doesn't need one individual dictating its future." All eyes swung to Elena. She sat composed, her notebook open but her pen still. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then she spoke. "Clause 14.3 of the Compliance Charter," she said softly. "No contract involving structural integration can bypass continuity authorization. Any attempt to proceed without it constitutes breach of fiduciary duty." She lifted her gaze to the board. "A breach that carries personal liability." The words dropped like stones into still water. Directors shifted in their seats, expressions tightening. Nordell's executives exchanged glances, their patience thinning. Travis's face reddened. "You're twisting the charter." Margaret Liu cut him off. "She's quoting it." The meeting collapsed into chaos. Voices overlapped, accusations flew, and for the first time Travis realized the board was no longer shielding him. They were protecting themselves. When it ended, Nordell's delegation departed with icy formality, warning that their interest was waning. The board recessed in exhaustion, leaving Travis standing alone in the cavernous room, sweat on his brow. Elena closed her notebook, rose from her chair, and walked past him without a word. In the hallway, her steps echoed softly. She knew the battle was not over. Travis would not surrender gracefully, but the balance had shifted and everyone had seen it. The once invisible compliance officer had become the fulcrum of the company's fate, and Travis Cole, once untouchable, unstoppable, was now a man unraveling thread by thread. The storm finally broke over Halberd Dynamics. For weeks, tension had thickened the air like invisible smoke, but on the morning of the decisive board meeting, the atmosphere was razor-sharp. Executives filed in with hushed voices, papers clutched tightly, as though the weight of the company's future was bound in their folders. Travis Cole entered last, His suit was immaculate, but his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. He carried himself like a man still certain of victory, but behind that smile was desperation. The Nordell deal had stalled, his support dwindling with every passing day, and this meeting would decide whether he held on or fell. Elena Morgan was already there, seated calmly at the long polished table. Her leather-bound ledger rested before her like a silent sentinel. She didn't fidget, didn't glance around. She simply waited, as she always had, with the patience of someone who knew the ground beneath her feet was unshakable. The chairman cleared his throat. "Today we must decide the future of this company. Mr. Cole, you may begin." Travis rose, flashing his polished grin. He launched into his pitch with practiced energy. Charts, numbers, projections, promises of explosive growth under Nordell's acquisition. His voice echoed through the room, smooth and confident, but beneath the bravado was a tremor only the attentive could hear. When he finished, he spread his hands dramatically. Halberd Dynamics cannot cling to the past. It must embrace the future, and that future begins with Nordell. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the chairman turned. "Ms. Morgan?" Elena rose slowly, opening her ledger. The rustle of pages was louder than Travis's speech had been. She adjusted her glasses and spoke with quiet clarity. "For 15 years, I've watched every contract, every clause, every number that passed through this company. Continuity isn't about clinging to the past. It's about ensuring the future has a foundation. Without it, there is no company, only a shell waiting to collapse." She turned a page, revealing notes scrawled in precise handwriting. Nordell's proposal promises growth, but growth without stability is a gamble. Their balance sheets hide liabilities. Their promises lack timelines. They've offered us a golden bridge, but one built over quicksand. Her voice sharpened. And Clause 14.3 of our charter makes it clear. No merger can proceed without continuity authorization. Without it, this deal is not just reckless. It is illegal. A ripple passed through the room. Directors exchanged uneasy glances. Nordell's executives shifted in their seats, their composure cracking. Travis slammed his hand on the table. "She's sabotaging us! She's afraid of change, afraid of progress." Elena met his glare with calm steel. "I'm not afraid of progress, Mr. Cole. I'm afraid of rot hidden beneath polish. And I will not let 15 years of integrity be destroyed by vanity." The chairman raised a hand. "Enough." The vote was swift. One by one, the directors spoke, some reluctantly, others with relief. In the end, the tally was undeniable. The Nordell deal was dead. Travis stood frozen, his smile finally gone. His empire of charm and bravado had collapsed in a single afternoon. The chairman's voice was firm. "Mr. Cole, the board no longer has confidence in your leadership. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position as CFO." The room was silent as Travis gathered his papers with shaking hands. His polished shoes clicked on the marble floor as he walked out, each step an echo of failure. For the first time, the man who had commanded every room left without applause. Elena closed her ledger, her hands steady. She had not shouted, had not schemed. She had simply held the line, and the truth had done the rest. Margaret Liu leaned closer, her voice low. "You just saved this company." Elena allowed herself the faintest smile. "I only did what I always do. I kept the balance." Outside, the skyline glowed with the first light of dawn breaking through the glass walls. Halberd Dynamics had weathered the storm, not because of spectacle, but because of quiet strength. Elena Morgan, once invisible, had become the architect of the company's survival. And she knew this: true power was never in noise. It was in the silence that held steady when everything else shook. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful tales of revenge, resilience, and hidden victories, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.